And a very warm welcome to Wellbeing Mission Control. I'm always delighted when you can join me. Let me ask you a question. Are you the kind of individual who easily loses their temper? I mean, how often do you experience a really strong volcanic urge to just explode with righteous indignation? Temper is a tricky subject to tackle, but I know we've spoken about it before. Some of the people I've been in touch with recently have expressed further interest in this subject. We'll just touch on it very briefly. First of all, to explore the dynamics of where this comes from, look at a couple of techniques you can use to help to temper the temper. The first thing is that those outbursts are usually the result of an accumulation of stresses or difficulties, sometimes fatigue, mental, physical, emotional tiredness that shortens our fuse. And then it takes only a relatively minor issue to trigger a major avalanche. It happens. Making sure you've got plenty of rest, that you're breathing, even if you can create the space to practice a little bit of meditation. These simple approaches can help you to take better control over some of this really unpredictable emotional energy because when we lose our temper, when we experience this kind of emotional outburst, we usually experience regret in the aftermath. We sometimes feel shame or guilt. And then we have to try and repair the damage of things which have been said, which shouldn't have been spoken. You know what I mean. And it's so much easier to head this volcanic eruption off at the pass before it starts to create damage to our relationships. Because if you've ever had an outburst at work, you know that is potentially damaging to your career, to your reputation. In my experience, most people tend to have these outbursts with people they're very close to, perhaps because they feel instinctively it's a safer environment to vent their spleen, to just give rise to their anger. But it can be a very, very unpleasant experience, not just for you, but also for the people who are on the receiving end of that uncontrolled vitriol, all that anger coming out. What I'd like you to consider is just a couple of simple things. Now, if you can catch yourself before the anger explodes, that's tremendous. I remember it was a long time ago that I was experiencing an absolute outburst of rage, and I caught myself before it erupted, and it just struck me as so absurd. What was I doing? What was this childish outburst? And strangely, it really made me laugh. I was laughing at myself. What are you like? Just letting all of this frustration bubble up to the surface. And I think the laughter was a good safety valve because the absurdity of my own response just seemed to put everything into a clearer context. But if you can remember to breathe a little more deeply, if you're in a situation, or perhaps you're with a person or people who you find exasperating as being very difficult, probably never happens to you. But if you do meet such people, one of the great things to do is to just pause as you take that deeper breath. You hold the breath for a heartbeat to give you a little bit of space to assess what's really going on. What is the miscommunication? What is happening here? It's also an invitation for you to say, I'm going to take a short break. I'm going to take a step away from this situation so I can just regroup and just gather my thoughts, get my feelings under control so that maybe I can listen better or express myself more clearly. And that's a much more satisfactory way of dealing with things. We're not trained to do that. I could argue that in some ways we're conditioned to respond too often with anger and frustration. But if you can take a step away from the situation, from the people, or from the person really aggravating you, that can be extremely helpful. Distance is an enormously beneficial advantage to bring into a stress situation. The physical distance allows you to pause and just assess what's really going on. And that encourages you to use a part of the brain that is more adept at logical analysis, at understanding what's really going on, rather than the knee jerk anxiety, fear, and defensive responses that come from the survival mechanisms in the brain. Breathe more deeply. Take a moment to pause. Check out your reaction. Ask yourself a simple question. What if I choose to remain calm? What if I choose not to respond? What if I choose to laugh? What if I choose to take a step back from this? All of these are options which, in a simple neurological term, just using a different part of the brain, but it's deeply, deeply liberating, and it puts you in control of the process of self-expression where your anger is not driving you, and sometimes driving you into situations which are regrettable later. These are very, very simple techniques. Breathing, creating space, and having the physical distance between yourself and what's causing the stress of the others. That can revolutionize your life. They're very simple techniques, but a lot of the mechanisms, at least superficially, are very simple in their nature. They're plus, minus, positive, negative, and we can use those simple hardwired reactions to exercise more control over how we think and feel and behave to create better outcomes for ourselves and for the people around us. I'd love to know what you think about that, because pretty much everybody I've ever worked with has experienced the great dark demon of anger. It's in all of us. Learning to deal with it effectively without suppressing it, that's a really good strategy to think about. I'd love to hear your comments. It's always a joy to share your observations, get your feedback and suggestions. And what I'd love to do right now is to wish you a stress-free, wonderful day. I'll be back to you tomorrow.